Welcome to Telling the Stories of Our Lives. Really, the subtitle is really the most meaty part of it, talking with family members about their history. So many of us have probably heard sayings over the years about when a person dies, a library dies, when a person goes away, we lose several lifetimes because of all the people that they've connected and interacted with. And I always maintain there's a reason why those stories stay around or those sayings stay around. It's because they're true. So many of us, too late usually, lament that we haven't spoken with a particular family member, or, I thought I'd get around to asking them about their childhood days, or asking them about maybe a first marriage or another family or depression, or what polio was like, or what other health emergencies in their lives were like, since we're experiencing a health emergency. So I think it's really apropos that as we have time to spend with family and with our close loved ones, I think it's really appropriate that we think more about, maybe I should do a little bit more family story and do a little bit more of talking to my relatives. So as you see on your screen, as we're close to a lot of the important people in our life, as we're hunkering down, as the Indiana governor has asked us to do, take this opportunity to just talk to each other about your family stories. It can be really simple, can start simple, and it's amazing the information pathways that can open up, things that you never thought of. And I don't know how many times you have been stunned, but I've been stunned so many times in my life with, wow, if I hadn't started that conversation, I would have never known that. And it was key to my family story, to my research. So as we spend time with loved ones, let's take those opportunities. And they come in all shapes and forms and sizes. So as we're looking at family and close ones, talk to our children, no matter how old they might be or how young they might be, because they too might have stories that prompt recollections and memories for us. So I really, at my core, believe that storytelling, interviewing, life stories, oral history, all of that is so important, so very important to discovering our stories, to finding our family history. It's really very, very important. And as we have this opportunity thrust upon us by this health emergency, why not turn it into gold? Why not turn it into something that can be really meaningful and important for us? So talking with relatives, we might say, been there, done that, know all about that. I don't need a refresher on that. Well, have we really spoken with relatives? And I hope that the next few minutes I'll give you a couple things that you can put into action. So I hope you all embrace with me the fact that I believe your family story includes more than dates and places. It includes the context. So a few of you must have heard the old saying, we as family historians, as genealogists, we're supposed to fill in between the dashes. On a tombstone, you have the name, the birth date, dash, death date. Well, our job is to put meat on the bones of that person, to breathe life into that family history. So it's really critical that we find in between the dashes. And we do that by talking to family members about their stories. So interview family members for their stories, and their stories will contribute to your story, clues to finding more of your story. Tales from a relative's life will add interest to your family tree, to your family history. And even those younger than us may be able to provide a lot of enlightenment for our family story. I've spoken to many people, and I can't count how many times in my career I've heard, well, Curt, wish I would have known this like 2 decades ago because I'm the oldest person in my family. There's no one else around. And why should I talk to anybody because they're all younger than me? Well, cousins, nephews, nieces, grandnephews, and grandnieces, They may have had information passed down to them through different lines in their family than you have had passed to you. So, talking with everyone in your family, just having a conversation about anything, literally about everything, might provide you with a lot of really important clues about your family story. And at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for, is to complete in context and make as robust as possible our family story. So it's a pretty cool thing to have this opportunity. Too bad it had to be such a hardship on us to bring this opportunity where we're all kind of sequestered in our houses. But take the opportunity to talk with any relatives you can. And even if you're not sequestered with relatives, oh my goodness, we live in the best of times for family historians with all the technology that we have available to us. What we're doing right now together this afternoon, you could do with a family member, with several family members. You could have 2 or 3 people on a Zoom call at the same time, on a Zoom connection, and be talking about anything, everything. And you'd be surprised at the wonderful stories that would add context to your life. So, the big question, how to begin. Put in the background a cup of coffee. I know there are people on earth that the smell of coffee doesn't do much for them at all. But for a lot of people, don't know a number, but I think a goodly number of people, the smell of coffee will bring back some memory. And that's why I have it there in the background. The best way to begin is to begin the way you both feel comfortable. And I say both, I mean you and the person or persons you want to have a conversation with, you want to interview. I probably am in the minority, and I'll spend just a few minutes here talking about the different ways of setting up an interview with a relative or anyone else for that matter, doing a life story, doing an oral history interview. I tend to be more on the conversational side. And there's the academic approach on one end of the spectrum, and there's the really conversational approach on the other end of the spectrum. And I tend to be someone who's way on the conversational side of the spectrum. I know there are very good reasons for all of them. And that's why I say, do what you're comfortable with. I'm going to broad brush this just a little bit, but the academic approach is that you spend many, many hours researching the person's life, their biography, what they like, what they dislike. You spend a lot of time figuring out the best question to ask and the questions one should stay away from. You spend a lot of time getting to know the person's friends and colleagues and family members. You become an expert in that person's life before you interview them. There are valid reasons for doing that. And there are some amazing, absolutely amazing interviews that happen with people that are expert, trained, and skilled in doing personal life stories. There's a whole society or organization of personal life historians who do this for a living. Get that totally. I fear that's what most people hear about and they think, oh my goodness, I have to do that. That's the only way to do an interview, the only way to do a life story. And oh my goodness, no. Don't put that bar up so high. Don't let yourself be intimidated by, oh my goodness, I have to do 6 months worth of research. I know some public historians will probably grimacing at what I'm saying right now. Public historians, personal life historians, they do awesome work. We can do what is comfortable for us and still have it be meaningful. Just as another example, a very worthwhile project, but a couple of colleagues and I spent an academic semester helping someone from a local university here in Fort Wayne do the research before interviewing even one person from a particular ethnic group that's settled here in Fort Wayne. If that's the way you want to do it, and that's the way you need to do something, fine, perfectly legitimate. But if you want to have a conversation with a grandniece over what life was like for you when you were growing up, or further, you want to talk to someone else in your family, a cousin, about what life was like for them, perfectly fine to set a context and just a few questions to begin with. and see where the conversation goes. Our interviews with relatives certainly don't have to be what I call one and done. I have one shot at this, got to cram everything in, got to do it perfect, or there'll be no other chance. In fact, if we do it right, in my opinion, if we do it right, one conversation can lead to multiple other conversations. And, how awesome is that, to have multiple other conversations? So begin with the way that's comfortable to you. And usually that's in my opinion, a pretty low key approach. But again, what's comfortable for you? What are some other tips? Well, number one, when you have any conversation, it's always great to have some, people call these props or little crutches, and that's fine. Bring some pictures or bring some other things that might spur memories. We've all heard the phrase, a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? Well, that phrase also has stayed around a long time because it is. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So bring a picture as a conversation starter if you think you need one. You're not required to bring a picture. It's not like, I can't do an interview because I can't find a picture. No, it's just bring something that you think would be a conversation starter. And pictures are great conversation starters. No, the person you're interviewing doesn't have to be in the picture. It can be a picture of the World Trade Center. You can start a conversation around, where were you when? Where were you when you first heard about 9/11? Where were you when the towers fell? You could bring a picture of a park and you can ask, do you remember and can you tell me when you first went to a park? What did you do on your first picnic? What did your parents? You could be talking to a grandparent or you could be talking to a grandniece. Ask your grandparents, so what did they do when you were little? What kind of fun did you have at first birthday party? All kinds of ways. So you can take a picture that really doesn't relate anything directly to the family as a discussion starter. Do what's comfortable for you. The whole point is to get a conversation going. So a picture's worth 1,000 words. And if you don't want to and don't have a picture, there's my favorite category of things, stuff. Bring other stuff with you. And it doesn't have to be a whole lot of other stuff, but bring mementos. Bring things like military insignia, certificates. You can even bring along a uniform or a cap or a helmet. Sometimes family heirlooms. Sometimes a particular type of stitching or crocheting. Pins, barrettes. Just things from other days that your interviewee might find interesting, might find fascinating, might get the person you're talking with to think a little differently about the story they want to share with you, the story they're going to share with you. We've had in all of our families such strong and proud traditions of military service. That's always a good discussion starter. Even if the person you're interviewing doesn't have a direct tie to the military, we know they have an indirect tie somewhere to the military. Ask them about service, about their perceptions of service. There's so many ways you can go. When you have heirloom clothing, it's wonderful. It brings back memories when the person first saw that bonnet or that sash or that pin, or when the last time the person saw that bonnet or sash or pin. So there's all kinds of ways that we can get our mind and the interviewee's mind focused on finding those stories. And I think that's really important. We can help each other out. Just a few days ago, my colleague Allison did an awesome Zoom program on heritage cooking. And we thought that was a really good program to present because, whether we know it or not, our noses, our olfactory nerve, even though during this time we're not supposed to touch our face, our noses are the strongest memory trigger. Science doctors have proven that over and over again. So why not, when you're interviewing someone, why not have that pot of coffee going? Why not have those fresh muffins on the table? Or even better, why not have that legacy dish cooking on the stove or baking in the oven? We know what strong memory triggers food are, and because there's science behind it, because our olfactory nerve is the strongest memory trigger. We smell something, our mind is immediately scrambling to find what we relate to that smell. Try it if you haven't really ever thought about it. Me smelling cigarette smoke. No one in my family smoked except my older brother. Whenever I smell cigarette smoke, without me even trying, thinking, without any intentionality on my part, a thought about my brother comes into my mind, because that's how I associate the smell of smoke. Try it with yourself. You'll find that same thing. So you can have some awesome interviews when you bring, I know it sounds a little funny, a musty photo album or book, because that will conjure up some kind of memory in that person. Better when you're brewing a cup or a pot of coffee, when you're baking some things. I want to take just a few moments to share with you how powerful this is. So on your screen, you see 4 things: cream of wheat, some yeast donuts, some, I'm using the term loosely, chili. And over to the far right, you see the oatmeal freezer cookies. So anytime I smell any of these, it brings back for me really strong memories of my childhood. And I'll quickly tell you why. So cream of wheat, I know that's everyone's favorite. I think it's like eating wallpaper paste. But that's what we had when we were growing up in grade school and middle school. And my mom wasn't well a lot of her life, and so she didn't get up in the mornings. So guess who got to prepare breakfast for the 6 remaining people in the household? My sibs and my dad. I did. And so I quickly found a routine. One morning was cream of wheat. One morning was oatmeal. The next morning was cream of wheat. The next morning was oatmeal. And when you're making cream of wheat for 5, 6 people, you're in a big pot, cream of wheat, and you stir vigorously to get all the lumps out, etc. But I can smell cream of wheat in the few times I've had it in my adult life. And it takes me right back to that kitchen where I spent middle school and grade school years cooking for my family. It wasn't an elaborate breakfast, but it brings that memory back. The best memory, though, are the yeast donut memories, because it always brings back the, let's just call it tension between my father's mother, my paternal grandmother, and my mother. My paternal grandmother came up every summer to spend a week with us, and she loved to make us yeast donuts. And we love yeast donuts because, 1, nothing is better than a warm donut, and 2, those powdered sugar clouds that we could create in the kitchen. Oh my goodness, what fun! What a mess! What fun! Well, Grandma liked to make those yeast donuts because us kids liked them, but I really believe there was another reason, and that was because it aggravated the heck out of my mother, because it messed up her kitchen, which was a mess anyway, but that's irrelevant. So I can walk into Meyer, or I can walk into Charlie's Donuts or Dunkin' Donuts, and I smell yeast donuts. Now, they got to be yeast donuts. And I bring back those fun times watching my grandmother aggravate my mother and how wonderful those cookies tasted. So I'm going to skip the chili. That's one of the few things my mom could make. It wasn't really chili, it's goulash, but I can smell that and be right back in the kitchen. But on the far right, those oatmeal freezer cookies, I had forgotten about that. And this is how memory works. This is how it conjures up stories. And when we're interviewing people, we want to grasp, get those stories, record those stories. So been years since we had any oatmeal freezer cookies. So my youngest sister made some for a sibling Christmas we shared about 10 years ago. She walked in the house. I didn't even have to see them. I could smell them. And I said, those are oatmeal freezer cookies. And those memories of the great time making those, stealing some raw dough, packaging them up into the squares in the wax paper and putting them in the refrigerator, and how disappointed young kids are that they couldn't bake those right away. So these 4 simple things, I could come up with a couple of hours worth of stories telling you about memories that came back to my mind just from the smell of these. So all that's a long way of saying, bring pictures and other props, if you will, to an interview with a relative. If you're hunkering down, as the Indiana governor says, with a relative, family member, you can bring it off your bookshelf, bring it out of your kitchen cupboards, bring it out of your pantry, put it on your stove. all those things create great memories. So I hope you have at least a little bit of an idea in mind about how easy it really is to get started in a conversation about trying to bring memories to a person that we're speaking with. So I want to take you to the Genealogy Center's page. This is our home page. It will be changing over the next couple months. All of the features, though, as far as information and tabs, even though they'll be rearranged into the library's new website posture, all this same data will still be here. So when we're looking at the library's homepage, in the top left-hand corner, there's a button called Life Stories. There are many more really great tips and helps here for you as you're wanting to interview relatives so that you have a better family story. So that top left-hand corner, Life Stories, if you click on that link, you'll come up to this particular page. There are 5 links down there toward the second half, bottom half of the page, where my cursor's sort of floating around right now. Listen to Life Stories, questions, techniques, advice for communicating, and then 2 other just quick link tabs if you wanted to donate a family story to our collection to be available for people to enjoy. That's always a possibility, and you can message us about how to do that. We're going to explore the top 3 links there pretty quickly because I just want to give you, again, time at the end for questions. Sometimes the best way to get a feel for interviewing relatives or interviewing anyone is to listen to an interview. So in these listen to interviews, listen to Life Stories, we have Allen County Public Library interviews. Those are interviews that people associated with the library or librarians have done. Community interviews, people in our Allen County, Northeast Indiana community, those are interviews they have done. And the Lasting Lawyer Legacy Project, we have a really neat relationship with the Allen County Bar Association. Close to 100 lawyers have been interviewed. It's a pretty prescribed interview. They want to know what made them become a lawyer, what were their really highlights, meaning what made them fulfilled, why the profession was important to them. And they have some family history in there too. Neat interviews. My Life Indiana Stories and the Super Achievers, those are really well done oral histories that include videos. You don't have to video the interview. You can just do an oral recording as well. Oftentimes people are much less intimidated when you're talking to them if they know their picture's not being taken, as opposed to when you're talking to them and there's a camera there, no matter how small the camera is. So this Listen to Life Stories, I think it's a great way not only of seeing, hearing the stories of neat people in the community, it also gives us ideas about how we can do a life story, how we can interview a relative. And it can be just a short interview or a multiple number of interviews. So if you click on the question lists and techniques, you'll find about 6 links there. And if you explored every part of every one of those links, there's probably several thousand questions you can pick from. So I have intentionally eliminated the excuse, well, I can't think of a question to ask. There are amongst just those 6 links and the links and sublinks on those pages, thousands of questions you can ask. I'm not saying you have to pick from a list. Sometimes picking from what's in our mind, the family heirloom we've brought, our knowledge of the relative, whether it's a sibling, a child, a cousin, a parent. Sometimes our knowledge creates the best questions. But if you need help, these are great lists. So if we click on StoryCorps, here's their main page. So as their banner says, after 15 years of listening, we know what makes a good conversation. So all these red links here, these are questions grouped by those particular categories. And there are some good ones. And with any list of questions, reading or seeing a question may prompt a better question that you come up with. And that's cool. That's perfectly fine. The Jewish Gen site has amazing numbers of questions as well. So all kinds of questions that we can explore. My favorite link is this third link on the Life Stories page. You may not find it as fascinating or helpful as I do, but it's amazing. If you click on that link, you'll be brought to a splash page for a TED Talk video from Celeste Headley. I encourage all of you to watch this video. It's the best 11 minutes and 44 seconds you're going to spend during this pandemic, maybe ever. She is amazing. And again, 11 minutes and 44 seconds. She nails it on why we don't do well sometimes in communicating. What are the things that we can do better in communicating? Notice her title is 10 Ways to Have a Better Conversation. And really, when we're interviewing our relatives, that's what we're doing. We're trying to have a conversation, right? We're trying to have a conversation where they share with us all the gold that they have in their minds. We call that living history. We're trying to get them to share living history with us. So I'm going to go through quickly Celeste's 10 ways to have a better conversation. I have modified some of them briefly, minorly in some ways, and majorly in other ways, but you'll have to watch the video to know where I have modified her 10 suggestions. But I think these are really great suggestions. So we started out with why it's important to interview relatives. How do we start in a place that's comfortable for both of us? Use our olfactory nerves to bring back memories. Make a comfortable setting. There are lists of questions that we can use. Now we're at the interview. Now we want to talk to our relatives. What are 10 things we should do when we're talking to our relatives? So thing number 1, don't multitask. And you can say, yeah, I got it. I know that. But I'm guessing right now, because I was watching earlier, there are people that are eating. Perfectly fine. There are people that are probably watching their smart device or another device besides the device they're watching the Zoom call on. Probably doing all kinds of things, maybe even thinking about, oh gosh, it's getting on toward dinner. What am I going to have? Do I have enough food? Do I need to go out? Am I going to order something? I think what Celeste was telling us, and I wholeheartedly endorse this, don't multitask. Be present in the moment to the person. Why? When someone knows that you're 100% attentive, they will offer more and better information. Secondly, you won't have to worry about the next question or the next question because their story that they're sharing with you in the moment may easily provide you with the next question and the follow-up question. Number 2, don't pontificate. Oh my goodness. And I know we've all experienced this. We can see it on TV sometimes. The interviewer really wants to be the most important person, and he or she is using the interviewee to do that. There's no reason and no point to do that in a family interview. Don't use the interview as a way of beating someone over the head about beliefs of theirs that you don't agree with. Don't use it to really make yourself look smarter, make your opinion look better, make your position on the virus look more important. Just don't pontificate. It's a conversation. So don't multitask. Don't pontificate. Just ask the question. You'll get a better response. If you want to have an angry or upset interviewee, sure, go ahead. Ask a pointed question. Beat them over the head with your opinion. But I don't think that's what we want to do. We want to have someone who's really comfortable sharing with us. Someone who knows that we have a bit of empathy and that we want to hear their story. So don't multitask, don't pontificate. We have heard this our entire lives, and so often we catch ourselves not doing it. Ask open-ended questions. For people that are even mildly uncomfortable with being interviewed, if you give them an out, they will take it. What's an out? Asking a yes or no question is an out. Did you go to elementary school? Yes or no. Did you graduate from high school? Yes, no, etc. Maybe better questions are what are often called the reporter's question, the who, what, when, where, and how. So what was your latest grade in grade school? Where did you go to grade school? If I asked my father-in-law where he went to school, which I did, fascinating, absolutely fascinating. He went to a one-room schoolhouse, and when he graduated from his college, he taught in a one-room schoolhouse. All kinds of stories and wonderful interviews, snips came about because of the one-room schoolhouse. If I asked him, did you graduate from high school? The answer could have easily been yes or no. So ask open-ended questions. I know I've heard it a lot, and I know some people say, I already know that. Catch yourself, watch yourself. How many times do we ask yes and no questions? Did that make you feel scared? Yes or no? The better question is, how did that make you feel? And they can tell you whether they felt threatened or scared or mortified or incredulous, whatever feeling. They had the feeling. They know what the feeling is. Number 4, go with the flow. One of the reasons why I tend to be on the other end of the spectrum between the academic approach to interviewing and the conversational approach is go with the flow. Sometimes we're so worried about asking the right questions in the right order that we're not doing much listening, and we're missing a lot, and we're not really queuing up the next best question for our interviewee. So go with the flow. Meaning number 1 of go with the flow is see if questions develop out of the very conversational, very relaxed, and very focused conversation you're having with your relative, and go where that takes you. If you don't get down your pre-prepared list of questions, that's okay. That just means you have an opportunity for another interview. Sometimes I would say most times, the spontaneously generated questions that come about because we're actually listening to what is being said rather than worried about the next question we're going to ask, those tend to be the best questions. Another part of going with the flow is make sure that you are, again, still in the moment. If distractions flow into your mind, make sure they continue to flow right out of your mind. So be present. If you don't know something, don't say you do. If you don't know, don't say you do. Oftentimes, to try to establish empathy, the interviewer will try to agree and say they experienced this, they were there, they know what the person was thinking, doing, seeing. Don't say that if you really don't know. It doesn't help establish a bond or establish a relationship. We think that it does, but more often than not, we'll get caught in that web. And the interviewee may not tell us something because she or he thinks we already know, because we said, oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I was there. So it's not about us, the interviewer. It's about the relative. It's about the family member. It's about who we're interviewing. Sometimes that can be really hard. You know, ego is a really precarious thing. It's wonderful for us to have a healthy ego because it propels us through some challenges. But oh my goodness, can our big Montana-sized ego sometimes get us in a lot of trouble? So try to back that ego down. If you don't know, don't say you do. Don't say you know. Just look engaged and ask appropriate questions and make appropriate responses that don't have anything to do with you being on par with them or on equal with them. It's not important. It doesn't help or doesn't add anything to the interview. A related point number 6, don't equate your experience with theirs. No two people perceive the exact same thing the same way. So what benefit is it in a conversation with a relative to act as though you completely and totally understand what they're saying about an experience? Have them continue to articulate about the experience. A couple sloppy experiences that I have observed amongst my family and amongst other people who are in interview-like situations. When a loved one dies, I know what you mean. I lost my father 6 years ago. No, the death experience for every person, I'm sorry, is unique and individual to that person. It contributes nothing to the interview to say, I know exactly how you feel. No, I don't think there's a person on planet Earth who knows exactly how I feel when my father passed 6 years ago. I come from a pretty broken family. No one has any idea, even the millions of people who have come from broken families. It contributes nothing for me to empathize or try to empathize with someone by saying, I know how you feel. I lost the race at the statewide meet for my team. Oh, I know how you feel. How could I possibly know how that person feels? So it really doesn't contribute anything to that. My job, I wish I had a better job. Yeah, I do too. Ask a question rather than trying to establish that you had the same experience. Well, why do you wish you had a better job? What would you like to see as a component of your perfect job? Those are the kind of things. It can be so injurious to a free-flowing conversation to try to equate your experiences with the interviewee's experience. Again, it's not about you. It's about the person being interviewed. It's not about me as an interviewer. It's about who I'm talking with. That's really important. Number 7, try not to repeat yourself. Sometimes people who are being spoken with, who are being interviewed, if you repeat yourself, they can get the idea that you're not paying attention. And maybe you're not paying attention. And it's not a good thing. That's injurious to a really good interview, not to pay attention. If you want to go back to a subject, and that's perfectly legitimate, own that. Say, we spoke earlier about, you in the Army and how that wasn't really a pleasant experience for you. And I know you talked about this, but I was kind of interested. Can you tell me about that? Different pieces, what training was like, what boot camp was like, what being under fire was like. But try not to repeat yourself just without intent or without cause, because again, it makes the person being interviewed feel like you're not listening. Number 8, stay out of the weeds. And what do we mean by stay out of the weeds? Sometimes we can set up a question so long and so deliberately that the person being asked the question loses track of, now what was it you wanted me to tell you? Who did you want me to talk about? What were you trying to get me to say? Stay out of the weeds. A part of that stay out of the weeds is also trying to look for visual cues from the person being interviewed so that you can see, oh, this is a little sensitive. This is making a person sad. Maybe I want to rework my next question or want to ease up a little bit. So stay out of the weeds. Number 9 probably should be number 1. Listen. Celeste in her video, again, the best 11 minutes and 44 seconds you'll ever spend, says we should listen with the intent to learn, not listen with the intent to respond. So listen as open-mindedly and as completely as possible. Be in the moment. Listen. I mean, that's why we're doing the interview, right? Listen. Not to say we've had the same kind of experience. Not to say, oh, yeah, that reminds me of what Grandma said. Or, oh, yeah, this doesn't really jive very well with our family. Listen. Listen. And the last one, number 10, be brief. That's a hardship for me. My colleagues and those who know me know that I can talk forever about almost nothing. So it's a challenge for me to be brief. But be brief in your questions, and also be brief taking visual cues from the person you're interviewing. Be brief in the interview itself. The experts, I've never met a whole lot of experts, and I'm certainly not one. The experts say 20 minutes is a good benchmark for one interview session. If you're on a roll and the person is happy and willing and excited and engaged, you can go 2 hours. I know some people are shuddering. You can go 2 hours and it's just fine. But I would never plan even a 1 hour interview. 20 to 30 minutes maybe is the plan, and just see where it goes. But if you're in the moment, if you're truly listening to learn, not to respond, listening to learn, being brief, picking up visual cues, all that will help guide how long the interview is. And again, it doesn't have to be a one and done. our aspiration is the interview process is so pleasant and so enjoyable that the person we're interviewing wants to do it again, wants to continue the conversation at a later date, at a later time, maybe even in a later format. Be open to all of that. So, recording. How do we record these wonderful interviews? All kinds of ways. What I don't have on the screen in front of you is you can actually be taking notes on a piece of paper if the person doesn't want to be recorded in any way at all, so that you can key those notes later and try to capture what was said. But a lot of people won't object to being recorded if you, as the interviewer, don't make a big deal out of it. So don't bring in a big clunky piece of equipment and plug it in and then fuss and fight around with it because you really don't know how it works. That is so off-putting for an interviewee. It makes them nervous. It makes them think, oh my gosh, what in the world have I gotten myself into? So simpler is better. Less is more. So I list 4 things down there. All of us, with a few exceptions, have smartphones. There's some wonderful apps you can download, free apps on your smartphone that turn it into a recorder. You can just turn on the camera portion if the person is willing to have their image. There's all kinds of ways of using your smart device. That's perfectly fine. There are some USB size recorders that you can get for under $10. Not the best audio recording, but if the person is really intimidated by a larger piece of equipment, these little small recorders that run on battery, just kind of set it down like a pack of chewing gum on the table and it's recording. At almost any office supply store for 30 to 50 bucks, you can get a nice pocket-sized recorder. Again, you turn on, you sit down in the middle of a table or between 2 chairs, and it just records. In the Genealogy Center, in our Life Stories area, we do have Roland digital recorders. These are between $150 and $210, so it's not a casual purchase, but they're wonderful. They digitally record, they're bi-directional microphone, easy to calibrate. I say easy, relatively easy to calibrate. And again, you put it down between you, it picks up the interviewer's question and interviewee's responses. So there's all kinds of ways of recording. Don't let that be an impediment to doing the interview. And again, less is more, simpler is better. Don't make a big production out of it. If you bring someone into a figurative recording studio, you lose a lot of spontaneity. It's very, very intimidating. So just try to, again, do what's comfortable for the both of you. So you don't want to talk, or you don't want to talk one-to-one. There's all kinds of ways that we can get people to share their stories with us that maybe aren't as much face-to-face, but talking on paper or talking to a recorder just in a room by ourselves or by the individual self. So first bullet point I have right. Send a question with a piece of paper. Send a question on a piece of paper to the person. Maybe you can even text or email a question and just have the person respond by email, by old-fashioned postal mail, if that's the way they want it. Don't let the technology or someone's aversion to technology get in the way of finding those stories, because those stories are really, really important. Second bullet point, send a recorder with a question. Flip them a nice $30 recorder. You have a question on there, they push play, they hear the question, they push record, and they respond to the question. Again, be creative. There's all kinds of things we can do. We do live in the best of times. I mean, you can spend hours just going through gadgets on Amazon that some are clever and don't work very well, some are not very clever and work really well, and some are pretty cool and work really well. So find those ones that work for you. At a recent Roots Tech, this past Roots Tech 2020, there was a new vendor in the exhibit hall, autobiography.com. Really cool. For under $100, you basically get this book and an app where 90 questions, and I'm not really up on the details of it, but it's kind of a self-paced thing. You can do it every week or you can do it longer than that, but there are 90 questions The person gets one question, and then they open the app and they record their answer to that question. What an awesome thing. What a nice thing to do while we're quarantined, to have something like that. So it's currently available on audiobiography.com. I'm sure you can find it on Amazon as well. So there's all kinds of ways that we can record with devices and also record in low tech or no tech ways. The secret is to actually do it. So telling the stories of our lives, a huge part of that is getting the stories of the family members in our lives. So many genealogical hints and clues and pathways are discovered by talking with family members and knowing their stories and getting to know their stories. And story can pop up in so many different ways. So let's be open to that. So I am now open to any questions